Okay, here is the PowerPoint lecture for urban sociology. Those of you who were in class with me on Tuesday, this was the last slide that we got to. We were talking about strong community-based neighborhoods have started to weaken in recent decades, and some have disappeared completely. We spent class on Tuesday kind of going over some basic terminologies. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit just to kind of orient you a little bit. This is all stuff you saw in class and that you will have already in your notes. We basically talked about terms like urbanization, urbanism. Again, this is all review stuff. You have this in your notes. City growth, metropolitan areas, suburbs, exurbs, rural areas, megacities. I sort of inundated you with some terminology, but just trying to acquaint you with some of the terms that we'll be discussing in class and that you'll be responsible for understanding as we go through the course. So I'm going to continue laying some groundwork for this course. Here's our pickup point, and you'll want to treat this just like an in-class session. Since we're not meeting on Tuesday, this is kind of what you'll be doing. You will be receiving, by the time you're watching this, you will have received an email as well as some prompting as to how to go to your resources tab and open up the link for this. So if you're looking at this, you've already found your way to YouTube and you're watching this. Obviously, feel free to pause this. You can review it as much as you want. But this is just a nice, smooth continuation of the lecture that began on Tuesday. So there are 4 key themes in this course. First, cities and urban life vary according to time and place. Since the idea of cities have come to us approximately 10,000 years ago, the urban scene has been created and recreated time and time again. And very soon we'll spend some time probably in this video format talking about some of the earliest cities in the world, kind of what they looked like, what they were all about, and how they vary from place to place. And also certainly, the idea of cities 100, 200, 300 years ago in this country are very different than the ideas we have about cities now in terms of how they're constructed, what the buildings look like, and how they're created. The social life associated with the urban scene, if you will. So we'll spend some time with that. Also, second theme that we'll return to again and again: cities reflect and intensify society and culture. We talked about this point a little bit on Tuesday night. While cities do vary everywhere you look, everywhere they stand as physical symbols of human civilization. Everything is magnified and intensified in cities, and you're going to see this and hopefully start to understand this as we go through the course. United States cities especially represent powerful statements about contemporary forces of industrial capitalism. Also, cities reveal the best and the worst of the human condition. This is the third of the 4 major themes that we'll sort of revisit throughout the course. So, and I've seen this, and I know I asked you guys in class if you had traveled to cities, and some of you are from big cities or inner cities even. And you probably have seen that this is true. Cities reveal the best of what we have to offer. The richest people in our country who enjoy the most extravagant lifestyles live in cities. You find a lot of cultural diversity in cities. There are a lot of good things about cities and that happen within cities. At the same time, cities reflect the very worst of the human condition, such as chronic prejudice, poverty, hunger, homelessness. So we see the best and the worst. And the 4th major theme: cities offer the promise but not always the reality of a better life. I have spoken with immigrants, some very successful. Most immigrants end up locating in cities if they're coming from other countries. I'm going to get the statistic wrong, but I think it's pretty close to 75 or 80% of all immigrants who come into this country end up, at least initially, in cities. And the idea is that, better way of life. Wherever they are coming from, our cities in this country offer them the promise and hopefully the reality of a better life. But that promise doesn't become a reality for everyone. Since the time of ancient Greece, people have recognized that the city holds promises for a better life, but many city dwellers struggle to survive daily. Certainly we could go back and look at the Industrial Revolution when cities were just forming in Europe and in the United States. We talked a little bit about this in class on Tuesday, as well. Horrible working conditions for the vast majority of people living in cities. Now, it's not quite that bad today, but there are still problems and issues for a lot of people who live in cities. So, now, today the city is studied with the guidance of 3 disciplinary themes, and you'll want to also have these in your notes: social psychology, urban ecology and geography, and urban political economy. We'll start with social psychology, probably the more interesting thing to talk about at this point. Emphasizes how the social environment stimulates people. The social psychology of the city is probably an idea or concepts that we can relate to most easily in this course, because we've all been in cities, we've all been impacted by them negatively or positively. If you happen to be from a city, there are probably things you don't even notice about your lifestyle or ways that you behave, as opposed to some of us who are not from cities. When we travel, we notice because we're just not used to them, and vice versa. So what is it about the city that stimulates us? Is it the culture, the fast pace, the diversity? How does it stimulate us? How does it affect us? Does it affect our lifestyles in terms of how we travel from one place to the next? Does it increase our stress levels? All of these things, all of these ideas we'll talk about. Next, urban ecology and geography investigates the significance of the city's location in relation to natural resources and how many people occupy the city spatially. So again, we introduced this a little bit on Tuesday, but this, in fact, I think in your book there's a completely separate chapter for urban ecology and geography. So we'll spend some time talking about it. Especially the early cities of North America. It was so important for them to be located right on a waterway, because that was the main mode of transportation in the 1600s and the 1700s, before we had automobiles and trains and airplanes. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. That was a movie, wasn't it? I think it was. At any rate. I digress. Also, urban political economy. This is a third perspective. Highlights the importance and influence of global rather than local political and economic decision making on a city. And again, we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday. Decisions that are made all around the world, in the Middle East, on the African continent, in Asia, impact decisions that happen in our cities, in our country, and subsequently how they impact specific groups of people based on race or ethnicity, or even us as individuals. And the example I always use is gasoline prices. Forces beyond our control in other parts of the world trickle down to affecting our pocketbooks and our wallets in terms of how much we pay for gasoline. In the United States, we've noticed a shift. It's been called several things: the Sun Belt explosion, or the Sun Belt phenomenon. And you can kind of see the Sun Belt states. We're talking about largely. I'm going to be talking about states in the southwestern part of this country, but the Sun Belt, we've got all the way from Florida, Charlotte, all the way over to, you can see, in California. We've seen a recent decline in population of eastern and northeastern cities in the U.S. and subsequent population explosion in the southern, western, and especially southwestern cities in the United States. And some of the reasons for this that we're seeing is that a lot of the businesses that have been traditionally founded, maintained, and operated in the Northeast, especially like up here in New York and Massachusetts, those businesses have relocated because tax incentives are greater for these companies to relocate. So they're paying less money. Businesses are paying less money in taxes. They don't have the trappings of very densely populated city life to deal with, because a lot of these places like Phoenix, Arizona, for example, Las Vegas, Nevada, things are a little more spread out, so you don't have quite the issues there with traffic and pollution and things of that sort. So we're seeing a major population shift. The idea of what it means to be urban, that's something else we're going to think about. We're still in introductory mode here. What does it mean to be urban? What does that even mean? Does that mean that you dress nicely, have expensive clothes, and you eat at very interesting restaurants, culturally diverse restaurants? I don't know. Is that what it means? Is it a lifestyle? Is it something that we're forced into because we have to find jobs in cities? I don't know. So it's something that you'll kind of think about. The idea of sprawl. This is a term that we're going to talk about a lot. A term used to describe spread out or low density development beyond the edge of services. So you're talking about a city that just kind of keeps creeping out, kind of like Jell-O kind of like rolling down your countertop or seeping out of your refrigerator. It just kind of oozes and spreads, and that's kind of a gross analogy, but you get the idea. But it happens everywhere. Sprawl uses up land even when population decreases. So you could have population numbers dwindling, but still the trappings of urban life, the buildings, the pollution, the infrastructure, all that just kind of keeps seeping out from the center. And it starts to take over. Some of even the rural areas in some ways. It increases our dependence upon automobiles. It increases traffic congestion. It creates pollution. It wastes natural resources. So there are a lot of problems associated with urban sprawl. For the past 30 years, more than 200 new cities, 200 in North America, have been located at the fringes of older cities. So sprawl is such an issue that we're actually seeing the creation of completely new and different cities. Possible solutions to sprawl include purchasing and preserving open space. Tuesday in class we talked about how some states, like the state of Washington, has actually designated certain areas to be green spaces or rural areas. And it's illegal to have urban development in those areas. Setting urban growth boundaries along those same lines. Also revitalizing existing cities and towns. We talked about gentrification. I think I called it regentrification by accident in class the other night. I got in a hurry to make a point. Gentrification, the idea of revitalizing these cities and towns, and pursuing transit-oriented approaches. And the last term we'll talk about is hyper-urbanization, the rapid growth and overwhelming sprawl of cities, not just within our country, but also in developing nations, like on the Asian continent and on the African continent and in India. So this concludes the remainder of the introductory PowerPoint. This is what, if we were in class Tuesday, what we would cover, but given our 50/50 online format, this is what you'll need. So hopefully you have good notes with this. Email me if you have any questions. Thank you so much. That's it for this part.